afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? I think we're on. Welcome to my presentation. Thank you for being here. As I was introduced, I'm Pat Youzwa, and I'm Director of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, a role that I've held for almost 5 years. I am here to talk to you about the bank, why we exist, what we're here to do. And in particular, I want to talk to you about the role that we see at the bank in helping meet the infrastructure needs of the agriculture sector. Before I do that, I do want to share with you that I am a Saskatchewan farm girl. I was raised on a family farm in the Nipawin area, and my family still farms there. So I know firsthand how important farming is and how important the agriculture sector is to the economic prosperity of this province, and how important a vibrant farming community or sector is to keeping our communities strong and providing the quality of life that many of us in Saskatchewan have enjoyed. The future of that, I think, depends on making sure we have infrastructure that can support the tremendous opportunities that the agriculture sector has in front of it. So before I get to the opportunities in agriculture, let me tell you a bit about the bank itself. So the bank was created in 2017. It was created as a new tool in the toolkit in Canada to help build infrastructure projects and close the gap that exists in infrastructure in this country. Now, there are a lot of organizations that are involved in planning and financing infrastructure already. They exist at the federal level, the provincial level, the municipal level. So you might ask yourself, why do we need another one? So our role is not to duplicate what other levels of government are doing. In fact, we look at them as partners for what we do. Our role is to bring a different set of solutions. So we are not a granting organization. What we are doing is financing the construction of infrastructure, and we're doing it with public sector partners, but very importantly, our projects also have private sector investment as well. So we are able to leverage private sector investment in infrastructure. We broaden the pool of capital available for infrastructure. We make the pool bigger than it would have been otherwise. That's the role that we play in building infrastructure. When the bank was created, the government allocated $35 billion to the bank to be invested over a period of 10 years. It's a lot of money. We think that it has the opportunity to move some very significant investments to bring some transformational change in some key areas and meet infrastructure needs that are very important in Canada. This slide shows you and captures in that circle the bank, who our partners were, how we're approaching our mandate. And I'm not going to go into all of the details here, but I do want to just point out that while we have this pot of money, if you will, to invest, we are focusing our investments in 5 key priority areas. So those areas are public transit, clean power, green infrastructure, broadband, and trade and transportation. We've allocated a significant portion of the $35 billion across each one of these areas, and you can see the numbers there for yourselves. You can also see the type of projects that we're looking to invest in each of these categories. Trade and transportation is where the agriculture sector fits. And we've allocated over the next 10 years to look at investing up to $5 billion in these types of projects. We measure the success of our investments by measuring the outcomes. What are we trying to achieve out of the projects that we invest in? And so we have very clear objectives in each of the areas, and we've listed them here for each of our priority sectors. So we do have, for example, in public transit, we're looking to improve access, ridership to public transit for Canadians. We have outcomes identified in green infrastructure, clean power, And in trade and transport, we're looking at economic impact. How can we increase the volume and value of trade of goods and services that move in this country? The other one I'd point out is broadband. We're looking to connect Canadians digitally. We understand how important that is going forward, and we have initiatives underway to connect communities and households to high-speed internet and broadband. And we think there's opportunities for us to go beyond that and looking at bringing 5G kind of connectivity to communities as well, which I think is important in agriculture if we're actually going to leverage some of the technology that's available to your sector today. Lastly, I'll point out that we also have a focus on closing the gap on Indigenous infrastructure. We all know that there are gaps in infrastructure in Indigenous communities, and we've allocated $1 billion for projects across all 5 of our sectors to help close this gap. So what have we done to date? We started up in 2017. The first year or so, it took some time to build our capacity in our organization, and we've now, in the last year, have started to build some real momentum. So to date, we have invested in projects for a total value of over $21 billion. The bank itself has made financial commitments of $7.6 billion, and our commitments have been matched by private sector investment of $7.7 billion. We've also partnered with public sector partners who have contributed $6 billion to these projects. And there's a breakdown there of the investments and commitments we've made in each of our priority areas. So it's important to us to invest in each of these areas, but it's equally important to the bank that we are addressing infrastructure needs across the country, that we actually have projects from sea to sea to sea in Canada, and we pay particular attention to this when we're looking at not just the projects we have, but also the pipeline of projects that are in the works that might come to the point where we'll be able to invest in them going forward. So you can see here that while we're not in every province of the country, we certainly have projects in every region of the country. So I now want to talk about what we've done that's related specifically to agriculture. Our first investment in the agriculture sector was in Alberta Irrigation. It is in the modernization and expansion of irrigation infrastructure in Alberta. We have partnered with the government of Alberta and a number of irrigation districts in Alberta to basically upgrade and modernize and expand the irrigation infrastructure that's available there. We anticipate an expansion in the number of acres that will have access to irrigation, up to 208,000 acres. We will also improve the management of water, which I think will be increasingly important as we start looking at the impacts of climate change. We're going to be able to improve water security and access to water supplies going forward through the modernization that is planned. It's expected that this project will have a substantial impact on the economy of Alberta. When it's completed, we expect that the GDP of Alberta will receive a boost of almost $500 million a year. We're well aware that the government of Saskatchewan also has an irrigation project, a very ambitious one, that it's looking at Lake Diefenbaker. We are certainly very interested in this project, and we're willing and happy to engage with the government of Saskatchewan when it is ready to do so, to see if there might be an opportunity for us to also play a role in the development of this important project. The second project I want to highlight really talks about that important piece of infrastructure that gives you access to markets. Much of what's produced in Western Canada in the agriculture sector really needs to find its way to markets, export markets, to realize the value of that output. And access to the Asia-Pacific part of the world is very, very important. So we're very much involved in looking at, with other federal government agencies, the Asia-Pacific Gateway Transportation Network. So this includes the whole network of ports, rail, highways, intermodal facilities that connect Western Canada to the Asia Pacific. Specifically, in that whole network, we are focused in immediately on the new Westminster Rail Bridge. And I don't know how many, if any of you know about the bridge itself, but it's a very important piece of infrastructure because it links the Lower Mainland Vancouver to the Asia Pacific Gateway. It is a rail bridge that was built in 1904. It is owned by the federal government, operated by CN Rail, and it's used by every rail company that brings product from Western Canada to the Port of Vancouver. It is experiencing congestion problems, and it is expected to reach capacity in the next few years. We are using our accelerator fund. We have a set aside money to be able to accelerate the development of projects. We're going to use that to study what the options might be to rehabilitate, replace, and maintain the bridge for the future. And we're doing this with an eye of being able to define what might be a possible investment project for the bank so we can make a long-term commitment to improve the bridge and to improve access to the Port of Vancouver for product leaving Western Canada and going to the Asia Pacific. So what else can the bank do for agriculture? On the horizon, we're well aware of a lot of the changes that are taking place in agriculture. We're aware of the growing demand in the world for plant-based proteins, the opportunity that represents for farmers, for crops to be processed, and for access of different kinds of products to new markets. We're also aware of the increasing interest in biofuels, that you'll take crops like canola, oil-based crops, and use them to be crushed, refined, and processed and used as biofuels, biodiesel in particular. We have a mandate at the bank as part of our trade and transportation priority area to invest in infrastructure that can enable these kinds of developments. We can look at projects that are addressing enabling infrastructure, as I mentioned, but we can go all the way to the point of looking at processing facilities as well. We think this is important, and we think we can play an important role, and we're certainly very interested in engaging with anyone who has a project in this space that we might be able to partner with. We're also going to continue to work to access international markets. We know that access to markets is critically important for the agriculture sector to be able to actually realize on all the great opportunities that are in front of it. So I mentioned the one specific project with the bridge, but we are assessing infrastructure requirements across the whole network, not only within the Port of Vancouver, but the Port of Prince Rupert and other kinds of elements of that whole network that I mentioned before. So how do you work with the CIB? The Canada Infrastructure Bank is looking to focus its efforts on large transformational projects. So we are looking with a target of getting involved in projects with a minimum investment of $100 million. We are looking at projects that have a minimum capital expenditure of $200 million. We have a team. We're headquartered in Toronto, but we have an office in Calgary. I have with me Jody Parmar, who is from our Calgary office, and our team is on the ground in Western Canada talking to partners about potential projects we might be able to get involved with. We also have retained advisors. We have the former Premier Brad Wall, who's with us this afternoon, who currently is with Oslers in Calgary, and Brad works through Oslers as an advisor to the bank to help us identify and accelerate investment projects in Western Canada. I encourage you to think about the bank as a partner. We're here to make a difference. We see tremendous opportunity in agriculture, and we are here willing, able, we're flexible. I think we're quite quick and capable in being able to assess projects, to be able to structure commercial arrangements, to be able to put financing in place and help accelerate the building of infrastructure that we all know is so critically important in this country, both for our economic well-being, but also for our social prosperity. So with that, thank you very much for coming. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and I'm going to ask Jody to come up as well, because he has a great understanding of the details of many of the things we're doing, and so I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Really appreciate it. And yes, there's microphones in the middle of the room, so please, by all means, ask away your burning questions. Patricia, it was a great presentation. I certainly appreciate it. A couple of points that I would note from the list of areas that you mentioned. Broadband. You know, as a farmer, rural broadband has been an issue for me for forever. When people are trying to find my farm, I tell them when their GPS is rerouting, that's exactly where I live. Internet, it's not really just about farmers not being able to watch Netflix, although Game of Thrones was a commitment that I was not allowed to have. All through COVID, our kids were at home and they were trying to access internet and we were trying to access the data. And here we are at Canada's Farm Show where there is so much innovation and technology that would require broadband access. So thank you for bringing that up. How far are we towards getting some better rural broadband?
Thank you for the question. So we have been focused on bringing access to broadband to fit to communities and households across the country, to bring it up to the standard goal that the federal government has set. So that is
2%?
That's 50 download and 10 uploads.
So that's the beginning. I mean, we recognize that at the bank, that is the beginning. I think we're starting to engage in a conversation, so where do we go? We need to go beyond that, right? And so how do we do that? So we're focused there as a starting point, but that's not the end point. We certainly see in digital infrastructure as part of the future of the country, and we're just looking at what are the opportunities, how can we play a role, who are the partners who might engage with us, but we certainly do expect to do more in that area.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. I'm waving the flag for some better rural broadband service. It worries me a little because when I hear announcements from the federal government, they often talk about, you know, we want 98% of Canadians to have high-speed internet, which sounds like an amazing number, but coincidentally, only 2% of Canadians are farming today. So I'm just hoping that the 2%, that we can eliminate that 2% and that agriculture, you know, stands a fighting chance of doing some really innovative and creative things on the broadband side. The other note on the list of areas was trade and infrastructure, trade and transportation infrastructure. And that is near and dear to us in the agriculture industry. The Canada West Foundation just put out a great paper about transportation, but one of the highlights for me was that Canada has always been a top 10. In the list of countries that are reliable for trade around the world, Canada has been top 10. And this year we have come out at number 32. And that's kind of a dismal rating, and not enough people are talking about it. So I'm sharing that data everywhere I can go because it really worries me. And there's growth and opportunities, especially here in this province, but Canada has so much to offer, and we're well positioned to do that. But I do worry that we are a decade behind in the infrastructure that would be needed to truly capitalize on the growth opportunities. So can you give us some optimism that we can catch up, if we are playing catch up, or maybe I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning and feeling bad about it, but can we catch up? Can we actually expand our infrastructure opportunities to capitalize on this growth and do what we know we can do in this province and in this country?
Okay. Absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons the bank exists is to address infrastructure gaps. And we recognize that as a priority area. We've allocated $5 billion towards that. We're working actively, as I mentioned before, with Transport Canada, Infrastructure Canada, and others to assess the needs on the West Coast and what we need to do to improve and expand access to markets and for commodities, for product to come into Canada and for product to leave Canada as well. So we're on it, we're committed to it, and we're going to see what opportunities are there. We're also active in other ports on the East Coast, again, assessing what opportunities there are, looking at projects and investing there as well. So it is a priority area. I mean, the wealth of our country depends on it, and we are putting lots of resources into it, but we need good projects to invest in. I mean, that's the key, is to be able to identify not just the need, but to actually then have the right partners and investors that can bring forward the projects that we can help finance.
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear that. You know, for me, when I'm trying to teach my kids at home about, you know, what money is about, we think about needs and we think about wants, and then, in my opinion, the infrastructure is the only thing that's going to get us the needs and the wants. So thank you for making agriculture a priority, trade and transportation a huge priority. You heard it here. Thanks so much for your presentation today. We really appreciate it. A big round of applause for our speakers.
Thank you very much.